How much demolition experience is enough? The industry has spoken. Volvo embraces green steel. And embodied carbon, the story that refuses to die. All that and more on the Weekend Wrap. So, is it a telehandler? Yes. Is it a crane? Kind of. Is it an access platform? Sometimes. Is it a JCB? Yeah, it most certainly is. Yesterday afternoon, the fine folks at JCB drew back the curtain on the latest addition to its market-leading range of telehandlers. This is the 555 260R. That rotary telehandler boasts a 5.5 tonne lift capacity and a 25.5 metre maximum working height. The new unit is offered with a wide range of attachments, including, get this, pallet hooks, a 5.5 tonne carriage winch, a 2 tonne and 2 metre jib winch, a reduced height jib, a 5.5 tonne hook, a light duty bucket, a 360 degree rotating forks, and a man basket. Together, these attachments allow the 555 260R to operate as a telehandler, a crane, and a mobile elevating work platform. The package is available with both EPA Tier 4 F and EU Stage 5 emissions models, with auto-engine idle and auto-engine stop features as standard on the Stage 5 version.
Hi, I'm Peter Haddock and welcome to a very special 50th edition, can you believe it, of my podcast series. And today I've got some really exciting guests, the people that have actually got me to the 50 and also the people that I've worked with for many years. And we're going to do something pretty special for the 50th because we're talking the 3 C's with some excellent communicators. 3 C's, my folks, stand for collective, collaborative communications. And if you're listening to this, we're partway there because you're listening to us talking about those 3 means that you're interested in how to communicate in a digital-led first way. So great to hear that I've got 3 superb guests on today. We're going to start with Louise Carney, then it's Nick Drew and Mark Anthony, and all of those beautiful people are the communicators that I look up to, that I go to advice for, and that work with me to make things exciting and to make things interesting so that we can push this universe of the Earthworks community forward in a digital way and in a print way and in a community and in a collaborative way. Oh my goodness, it's going to be a fun podcast, folks.
I will admit that when this story first came to light a few months ago, I dismissed it. Some boffin at the Royal Institute of British Architects had proposed a moratorium on all demolition to safeguard what is known as embodied carbon. Embodied carbon is basically the carbon emitted when building materials are actually made. Fast forward a few months, however, and this is a story that is just not going away. In fact, it's gaining traction. And rather than being seen as a crackpot idea, it is potentially being used to drive political thinking and possibly even legislation.
There is a massive blind spot in our national construction policy. Up to 80% of a new building's greenhouse gas emissions will be caused by its construction, maintenance, and demolition.
These emissions, known within the industry as embodied carbon, are unregulated.
In the UK, embodied carbon accounts for more than 10% of our total national emissions.
The construction industry has the skill and knowledge to tackle these emissions. What's missing is the political will and leadership.
ACAN is launching a campaign calling for whole life cycle carbon limits to be set within national planning policy and the building regulations.
With a comprehensive report, policy briefing and wider political movement, ACAN will engage and awaken policymakers on this critical matter.
The benefits of this type of policy are far-reaching, supporting the creation of thousands of green jobs in the UK.
The case to implement this policy is clear, but requires a systemic change to protect us all from devastating climate change and environmental degradation.
ACAN's latest campaign demands that this change starts right now.
Now, the UK government is reportedly in the final stages of creating its new heat and building strategy. But Business Minister Lord Callanan says that embodied carbon was one of the areas under consideration. According to United Nations statistics, making steel, concrete and bricks creates a lot of carbon emissions. Concrete alone contributes around 8% of global emissions. And the engineering giant Arup calculated around half of the whole life emissions of a building could come from the carbon emitted during its construction and its demolition. The chairman of the government's Advisory Climate Change Committee, Lord Debon, said, "We need to think differently. It's not acceptable to pull buildings down like this. We have to learn to make do and mend." Lord Debon went on to say there needs to be a new planning law to stop giving permission for demolition, adding, "We are simply not going to win the battle against climate change unless we fight on every front." Climate experts are now urging ministers to make it hard for developers to demolish buildings without first exploring ways to refurbish and extend them. Should the demolition industry be worried? Yeah, I believe it should. There's a global move towards addressing the impending climate crisis. In just a few weeks' time, Glasgow will host the COP26 climate change conference. Governments, the UK included, could be looking for some headline-grabbing quick wins. And being entirely honest, UK politicians will be well aware that the next general election will be upon us in just a few years. The stewardship of the environment could yet prove to be the key political battleground, particularly for those looking to secure the notoriously green youth vote. Against that background, demolition companies should be very worried indeed about any political moves to address the embodied carbon issue. And reaching out to the various media outlets reporting on this issue will not cut it. It's too late by then. The demolition industry needs to engage instead with politicians and scientists if it is to fend off this very serious threat. And it needs to align itself with the biggest names in construction, not as their whipping boy, but as equals, because their livelihoods are equally under threat. If it doesn't, the demolition and construction industry could be negatively and hugely impacted. There can be little doubt that Volvo Construction Equipment is emerging as the equipment sector's greatest and most prolific innovator. The company is at the forefront of autonomous machine development. It has one of the broadest ranges of electric powered machines, and it's actively working on hydrogen power. And now the company has produced the world's first vehicle made from fossil-free or green steel from SSAB.
I'm extremely proud to be here today, presenting to you the world's first vehicle made by fossil-free steel. For me, Martin, this is a proof of that we can make progress. We can make quick progress in partnership, and with strong partners, brave partners, and bold partners like you.
And we work quick together. Imagine, I mean, we delivered this steel to you guys in August, and today we stand in front of the first vehicle produced, and it's ready to be driven and started. So it's the speed has been impressive.
It's fantastic. And when it comes to acting, I think it's so important to act, not because someone else tells us to act. We act because we want, we act because we can, and we act because we must. Because I think this is so important for our generation, but even more important for all the coming generations. And all the decisions we take, all the actions we take now will influence the future heavily. I think this is an amazing product. It's 8.2 ton. It's more than 3 ton of fossil-free steel. It's fully electric and it's fully autonomous. You talked about the speed, and the feedback I got from my team is also when it comes to the quality, the product properties, they are exactly the same as in conventional steel, so to say. And when we did our welding, when we did our cutting, we used exactly the same product processes, which is important then when we should start to scale. I must also say to our teams, both the SSAB team and the Volvo team, what a great efforts, and thanks a lot to all of you. When I saw this machine first time 2 weeks ago, then I felt this is for real now. This is happening. We can do it. And at that moment, I must tell you, that was for me very, very touching, actually.
Now, this is clearly an historic moment, and I understand your feelings, and I have the same feelings. And I think from SSAB side, we are extremely proud to be part of this partnership, and we are very much looking forward to future cooperation and things we can continue to do together.
Let me take you back. 2 weeks ago, a 50-year industry veteran posted on LinkedIn details of a discussion he'd had with a young person. That young person said he was considering sitting the course to acquire a demolition supervisor's card. This didn't sit well with our industry veteran, who took to social media to ask how such a thing could even be considered. And it snowballed from there. First, there were stories of individuals that had actually gained their supervisor card within 3, and in one case, 1 year. Then came the criticisms of training providers for allowing this to happen despite the rules dictating a minimum of 5 years experience. We heard accusations of training providers putting cash before caution. And I got dragged into this whole mess when someone suggested that I might ask these questions of the powers that be at the National Demolition Training Group. I duly threw open the doors and issued an open invitation. That invitation was greeted by an entirely predictable radio silence. So rather than becoming embroiled in all of this any further, I decided to create a simple online poll to gauge the feelings of the people that actually matter. Not the suits and not the commercially driven training providers, but the actual demolition men and women. That poll contained just a single question with 4 possible answers. The question was, how much demolition experience should be required before someone is considered qualified to apply for a demolition supervisor competence card? Respondents were asked to choose between 1 year, 3 years, 5 years minimum, and it depends upon the individual applicant. So I've been monitoring the responses throughout the past 2 weeks. To begin with, it looked like a unanimous vote for the current status quo. Almost all the initial respondents said that a minimum of 5 years was the correct amount of experience required before someone should be considered for a demolition supervisor card. And then something changed. One person, quite possibly the person that had actually earned his card with just a single year's industry experience, voted for, no surprise, 1 year. But then there was suddenly a deluge of votes for it depends upon the individual applicant. Well, when the survey closed just before I came on air, the final scores were as follows. In 4th place, with just a single vote, was 1 year. In 3rd place, with 3.9% of the vote, was 3 years. In 2nd place, with 46.1% of the vote, was a minimum of 5 years. And in 1st place, with 49.5%, just under half the votes, was it depends upon the individual applicant. So that's what the hundreds of respondents think, but it doesn't really matter. It will not change the fact that at least one person has gained their supervisor card with just a single year of experience and is now working with a big name contractor. He may be exceptional, of course. There have been instances of 11 and 12-year-old children earning a place at Oxford and Cambridge universities. Maybe this guy genuinely is a demolition prodigy. The survey also doesn't answer the more pressing question. If the rules state a minimum of 5 years experience, how did one person slip through the net with just 1 year? As an aside, we also heard claims from others that said they had just 2 or 3 years experience before attaining their card. It doesn't address the accusations of cash before competence that were levelled at the training providers. It doesn't address the initial question of whether a person with limited experience would have the requisite knowledge required to keep themselves and others safe. Nor does it address how fellow workers would respond to being told what to do by someone with significantly less experience. And I guess it also doesn't address why the NDTG failed to engage on this subject. But to be honest, that was never really a question. And maybe that is telling in itself.